Hello everyone, and welcome to this video. And today we will learn what the cognitivism approach is. Are you ready? So, what is cognitivism? The theory of cognitivism centers on how information is processed within the mind. It goes beyond observable behavior, emphasizing the internal mental processes that occur in learning. Cognitivism theory asserts that learners play an active role in information processing, and so there is a focus on developing areas such as knowledge, memory, thinking, and problem solving. The history of cognitivism goes back to the late 1950s. At this time, a notable change began to unfold in learning theory, steering away from traditional behavioral models towards ideas more based on cognitive sciences. This shift marked a departure from the exclusive focus on observable behavior, prompting psychologists and educators to highlight the significance of cognitive processes. And central to this change were new beliefs surrounding concepts such as critical thinking, problem solving, language acquisition, and also the complex realm of information processing. So, there are different beliefs of cognitivist approach. First, it focuses on memory as a storage and retrieval of information. Second, it prefers to concentrate on analyzing cognitive processes, and it considers schema as essential in learning. So there are different proponents of cognitivism approach. First, Edward John Tolman's latent learning or place learning. And his theory was first introduced by Bludgett, who made use of the paradigm of learning without reinforcement. Tolman, on the other hand, captured the idea of developed studies on latent learning. According to this theory, learning occurs in situations where there is no certain reward because of the presence of cognitive maps. An example of this is a human being's innate need to know where and how to go to places that will provide food when he or she is hungry, not because of the connection of stimulus to response. This is the reason why Tolman emphasized that organisms organize behavior around a purpose, which he calls the theory of purposive behaviorism. Second, David Ausubel's meaningful verbal learning theory. David Ausubel's theory focuses on the verbal learning method. According to Ausubel's theory, learners learn new information whole to pieces through direct exposure to information rather than discovery. In short, learning is gained through deductive reasoning. Information organized by the teacher is presented and readily received by the learners. Hence, meaningful learning occurs when new experiences are related to what learners already know. So, in his theory, there are two dimensions of learning processes. First is the reception learning. In reception learning, learners receive the information from the teacher. Therefore, the teacher should present ideas or concepts to the learners in a well organized manner. Second is the discovery learning. In discovery learning, learners focus on identifying the key ideas and work out to store this information on their own. Therefore, the teacher should expose learners to varied activities. So, the third proponent of cognitivism approach is Jerome Bruner's discovery learning theory or inquiry method or theory of instruction. In his theory, as opposed to Ossobel's theory of meaningful verbal learning, it emphasizes that learning is more meaningful to learners when they have the opportunity to interact among themselves and with their environment through conducting experiments, exploring and manipulating materials and equipment, wrestling with questions, and finding solutions to their questions. So the fourth proponent of cognitivism approach is Wolfgang Kohler's insight learning or problem-solving theory. This is rooted in Gestalt theory, where an individual evaluates information as a whole rather than receiving it in isolation. This theory also emphasizes that learners have the capacity to determine and understand the nature of any given phenomenon in a bigger view that involves exploring, analyzing, and structuring perception until a solution is found, where mostly problem is solved through the cognitive trial and error method. So, in his theory, Kohler used the chimpanzee experiment in describing the above pattern. A chimpanzee was placed inside a cage. At some point, the chimpanzee felt hungry and it started to look for food. Upon looking up, it gazed at the food hanging on top of the cage. It reached for the food but failed. It saw a stool and stepped on it to reach for the food. The second time around, the chimpanzee did not succeed. It failed once again. However, the chimpanzee did not lose hope. It paused for a while and looked for potential solutions. At this point, it piled up the stools and it attempted to step on them to reach for the food. But again, it failed. It was about to lose hope when suddenly it saw a piece of stick. The chimpanzee got the stick and planned on how to use it, gaining insight to finally use the stick. This experiment likewise led Kohler to arrive at the idea of insight. Insight is the imaginative power to discern immediately the true meaning of a situation. So the fifth proponent was George A. Miller's theory of data processing. This theory is grounded on Edward C. Tolman's latent learning, claiming that learning is a complex and internal process that occurs.
There are three main elements of information processing. Number one, information source. It refers to the places where information is stored. It is composes of the following three different types of memory. First, sensory record. It is the stage where first-hand information is received using the different senses. Short-term memory. It is the stage where information is processed and turned into behavior before it is transferred to long-term memory. Third is long-term memory. It is the stage where information is continually stored and has three different parts where different types of information are kept as. Okay, number one, semantic memory. It is the storage of verbal information such as concepts, principles, and generalization problems. Recollectional memory. It is the storage of records and events, phenomena, time, and places which have a memorable impact on the learners. Last is operational memory. It is the storage of skills and ordinal applied and methodological information needed to complete a task. The second elements of information processing, cognitive processes. It refers to mental activities that help in transferring information from one memory to another, such as attention. It is the power of focus on selective information, Efficient learning depends on the selective ability of the learner. Perception. It is the process of describing the information received. Repetition. It is the process of storing repetitive information for it to stay longer in the short-term memory. Coding. It is the process of decoding or using codes when transferring information from short-term memory to long-term memory. In other words, learners need to filter information that is necessary for learning. Storing, it is the process is anchored on understand and Bauer model that information is established on verbal units including structures of subject and verb rather than perception. This means that the learner's stored information are reliable and sufficient to stand the test of time. Last, retrieving. It is the process of looking for, finding, and activating information when needed. The last main elements of information processing, executive cognition or cognition information. It refers to the harmonization between information source and cognitive processes for data processing. Richard Atkinson and Richard Schifrin Information Processing Theory. This theory describes how information is processed into memory so that learners get to the best out of the stored information. Memory is the central point for learning, which is the ability to store information that can be used at a later time. Hence, learners learn when the human mind takes information, performs an operation in it, stores the information, and retrieves when needed. Stages of human memory. Sensory memory. This stage utilizes all the different senses such as olfactory, auditory, sight, smell, and touch in capturing information. Senses must be functional because they help encode captured information that will be transferred to the short-term memory. However, it would only last for less than a second. An example of this is a learner going to school who may enjoy looking at the beautiful green trees around but may tend to forget once he or she reaches school. So that is the first stages of human memory, which is the sensory memory. Another one, short-term memory. This stage selects information through processes of attention and perception transferred by the sensory memory. The short-term role is to process information perceived by the sensory memory. It is said to be the temporary storage of information because the short-term memory is working in process while filtering the most important information to be stored in the long-term memory. Once information filtered, it is transferred to the long-term memory. Nonetheless, if the long-term memory judges it as unnecessary and needs more filtering, it goes back to the short-term memory for review. After the short-term memory reviews and reduces information, it is transferred to the long-term memory. For example, when a transferee is introduced to his or her teacher, he or she has a tendency is to forget some of their names. Some strategies such as repetition, memorization, making sense, associating, and grouping could be used to increase the capacity of short-term memory to recall. The last one of stages of human memory, which is the long-term memory. It is the permanent storage of information related to the different areas of life, and is activated when information is needed. It is said that when we recall information, we call on our long term memory to help us remember things because it is the one that is activated during the retrieval phase. It could last from minutes to a lifetime. For example, during periodical exams in mathematics, learners recall the appropriate formula to solve the given problem. Information on the long term memory, if not rehearsed, can be forgotten. So there is also a three components of long-term memory according to Tolving 1993. First, episodic. It is the recall of the particular time and place, events and dates of one's personal experience. Number two, procedural. It is the recall of specific skills or steps in completing a task or referring, showing how. Third, semantic. It is the recall of general facts, principles, and concepts needed to allow standard questions. Cause of forgetting. Retrieval failure. It explains that forgetting is due to the inability to recall information. 2. Decay theory. It explains that forgetting is due to the failure of using information. Information gradually fades when it is not utilized. Third, interference theory. It explains that forgetting is due to the influence of another learning.
This is the guidelines to help learners effectively process information by Zhu and Brown 2015. Alan Pavlov's dual coding theory. This theory affirms that when two or more modalities are used in teaching learning, it is likely that learners learn better and faster. This theory upholds the principles of individual differences and learning styles and addresses children with special needs. Robert Gagne's cumulative learning. This theory explains that learner skills are arranged hierarchically from stimulus response, associating to concept, principles, and problem solving. The hierarchy of learning. First, signal learning. This learning refers to responses that are learned voluntarily. Respond learning. This learning refers to responses that are learned voluntarily. Third, training motor verbal response. This learning refers to combining or training two or more separate motor or verbal responses to develop a more complex response. Fourth, verbal association. This learning refers to the use of verbal connections to create association. Fifth, discrimination learning. This learning refers to a selective response which applies to given stimuli. 6. Concept learning. This learning refers to classifying and organizing perceptions to gain meaningful concepts. 7th, principle learning. Rule learning. This learning refers to combining and relating concepts to form rules. And last, problem solving. This learning refers to applying rules to appropriate problem situations. It is considered the most complex condition.
The 9 events of instruction. First, gaining attention. It is the process of getting the learner's attention before the start of the lesson. It is like asking the learners to pay attention to the discussion. Number two, informing learners of the objectives. It is the process of telling the learners what to expect in the lesson. When the learners are informed of the objectives and understand them, they will be guided properly and know what to expect after. 3. Stimulating recall of prior learning. It is the process of reviewing the previous lesson. 4. Presenting the stimulus. It is the process of connecting the past lesson to the present lesson.
Fifth, providing learning guidance. It is the process of presenting new concepts through guided activities. Sixth, eliciting performance. It is the process of knowing whether the learners understood the lesson through oral participation. Seventh, providing feedback. It is the process of verbal feedbacking, praising those who performed well and encourage more those who did not perform well. 8. Assessing performance. It is the process of evaluating the performance of the learners, either in a written examination or other means of authentic evaluation. Lastly, enhancing retention and transfer. It is the process of transferring learning to another situation to enhance the retention of the lesson.
Robert Gain gave two reasons why there is a need to transfer learning. Number one, learning in one context enhances a related performance in another context. Perkins and Solomon, 1992. Number two, learning is extended in one context to a new context. Bransford, Brown, and Cocking, 1999.
So these are the type of transfer of learning.